Good evening, Ram. How are you doing? How are you keeping? Welcome. Nice to see you. We will start in a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Ram.
Good evening.
Hello, Ram. This is Malti here.
Good evening.
I'm Alti.
Hi, Sajju.
Vani hasn't joined.
Not as yet.
So that I can keep it here and write also.
Good evening, Mr. Janaki Ram.
Evening. Welcome, everyone. We will start in a few minutes.
Hello, Ambika.
Hello, Malti. Hi.
Nice to see you on the program today.
I welcome Vani Vasudev and all participants. And I request Ram Menon to recite the school prayer, please.
Oh, hidden life, vibrant in every atom. Oh, hidden light, shining in every feature. Oh, hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other.
Thank you, Ram Menon. I got muted. Summary of what we learned last week. Real estate is the one where ego does not arise. Dissolve the I or ego by self-inquiry. I am that, or I am not this, or but preliminary help. Please keep your
Too much time.
Then Vani explained with verses from Bhagavad Gita and stories. And we should always question the belief system that we are the BMI. It's very important. And then in the form of a story with the king and three sons, she illustrated very well how the last son said, I don't do anything. They happen because of the presence of the self. That is a kind of disposition we have all aimed to reach through self-inquiry. Now I request Vani Vasudev to continue our discourse on Saddarshanam. I think last week we covered up to verse 30 as I noted. So I'm sure she will review and then we will continue today's session. Now over to Vani.
Thank you, Jankiramji. So, namaste and a very warm welcome to each one of you to today's satsang. We are very grateful to Jankiramji for his beautiful introduction to the talk. Really grateful to the School of Ancient Wisdom for giving me this opportunity to explore Sri Ramana Maharshi's Saptarshanam with all of you. I'm grateful to Ram, Ravi, Sajni, Jankiramji, Malti, Aniket, and all those who are instrumental in organizing, conducting, and recording these sessions. A big thank you to all of you. And to each one of you who are here. It's so wonderful to have jnanis like you, with whom I can explore Saddarshanam, who are ready to set aside this 1.5 hours out of your valuable time and busy schedules. I really honor each one of you for being here, for carrying out or for aiding your main priority of self-knowledge in this lifetime. Thank you. So as Jankiramji was saying, we had completed up to the 30th shloka of Saddarshanam. So let me share my presentation with all of you. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, Vani, we can.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So Saddarshanam, as we have understood by now, is also called 40 verses on reality. Sat means reality. Sat means the self. Sat means Atman, Brahman, the absolute, Paramatman. It has many different names, but all of them mean the same thing. It means the changeless truth, that which has no birth, no death, no modification, which has been there from the beginning, which is there right now, and which will continue to be there forever. Sat is also our own true nature. Right now, all of us, we are Sat, but many of us may not cognize this at this moment. Okay, so as we move into the 19th session of this series with the grace of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, let me offer my reverence and gratitude to the source of my inspiration, of course, Bhagavan, whose Saddarshanam we are exploring, to Sri Narasimha Prabhuji, my Sadguru who is guiding me on the path of Atma Vichara, to Sri Adi Shankaracharya, who has left us such a big legacy in the arena of Advaita Vedanta. To all of them, my gratitude and my pranams. With our eyes lightly closed, let us chant Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Asatoma Satkamaya together. Om Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo, Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let us offer our pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi and all the great masters of wisdom. May their grace ignite the flame of awareness within us and establish us in the self. So just a brief summary of what we discussed last time. Shlokas 31 and 32 is what I've written here, but I think it was 29 and 30 if I'm not mistaken. So there may be a mistake in the numbering.
Yeah, it was 29 and 30.
Yeah, okay, just excuse the mistake in the numbering.
No
but,
problem.
the summary of shlokas 29 and 30. So Bhagavan told us, meditating that I am not this body, I am myself that. So that is a useful preliminary aid to the quest of self-inquiry. But it is in itself not self-inquiry. So he says what is important is to diving into the heart, restraining speech. One is externally restraining speech, while outwardly restraining speech, but inwardly the chatter of the mind, the incessant chatter of the mind, which makes our energy divisive. So its mind is getting pulled, attention is getting pulled in so many different directions, and it disrupts focus of the mind. Consciousness is always shining, the self is always shining, and we are always the self. But what is important is to do the inquiry, to ask, who am I? When we ask, who am I, the mind becomes still, And when the mind is still, we see a very clear reflection of the self in the mind. So this is what is required, Bhagavan is saying. I am not this body, I am myself. That when we keep meditating like that, without investing enough time and energy, it's not enough if we just mechanically say, I am not this body, I am that, or Tattvamasi. What is important is understanding the truth. When you understand the truth, you don't have to repeat the truth. Listening repeatedly is good, but repeating mechanically and thinking that that is going to lead us somewhere, then Bhagavan is saying that is not going to lead you anywhere. Even to meditate on the self as something that is apart from us. Vedanta calls dhyana or meditation as object-oriented meditation. That means I am focusing on the self as something apart from me, not as the subject, but as an object. The way I focus on a deity. If I think of the form of a deity, if I bring the form of a deity into my mind and I focus on that, that is called upasana or dhyana. That means it's a mental object, it's a visualization. I have that object in my mind and I am focusing on that object. It helps to purify the mind. It helps to give focus to the mind. It helps to reduce noise in the mind. But it is not self-realized. It is not self-inquiry. So that is what Bhagavan is saying. Even on the self, don't meditate on it as though it is different from you. Abide as the self, nididhyasa. We say Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa. Shravana, listen to the truth, preferably from an enlightened master who is established as the self. Manana, repeatedly contemplate on the truth. That means clear away doubt zones. Whenever a doubt is there, remove it. Ask the master. I have this doubt, so what can I do about it? Then remove it. Or think deeply, inquire yourself. Many things will disappear when we start questioning our own beliefs also. So contemplate on it deeply and get rid of your doubts one by one. And then abide as the self, that is nididhyasa. So that's the difference between dhyana and nididhyasa. In dhyana, we are meditating on the self or on God as something apart from me, another entity, which I want to become. I am this, but I want to become that. So the mind is creating a split and we are trying to focus. That is objective meditation. We have made the self into an object, but is the self actually an object? The self is a subject, isn't it? The self is a subject. It is not an object. So, Bhagavan says, yes, it is important to understand that I am the self, that I am not the body. But what is more important, it is the foundation, it is required. Just like I said last time, the foundation for a building is required. But don't sit like this and say, my work is done. It is not. Once you have understood, this is the truth about myself, you have to convince the intellect. Because it is the intellect that is identifying with the BMI complex. Body, mind, intellect complex. So how will I convince the intellect? Through self-inquiry. So Bhagavan says, the meditation, I am not this body, I am myself, that is only useful as a preliminary to the quest. It is not itself is it itself the quest of the self? He is asking us. indirectly he's saying it is not. When the mind, introverted by being engaged in the quest of who am I, is lost in the heart. The heart here means the self. In Vedanta, heart means intellect. Here Bhagwan is referring to the heart as the self. The minute we ask who am I and the mind is stilled, we are lost in the self. We are immersed in the self. But if the vasanas have not been, all the bandha vasanas, the impressions that bind us, if that has not been eradicated, another thought will come. So we ask, for whom is the thought? It is for me. Who am I? But when vasanas become thinner and thinner through the process of self-inquiry, then there comes a point where the thought, I am the body, the ego is nothing but the strong belief, the misplaced belief, the untrue thought, I am the body, mind, and intellect. When that thought is gone, the ego bows its head and in shame. That's a poetic way, beautiful poetic way that Bhagwan describes. I am the BMI thought is gone. Then there shines by its own light a pure consciousness as the limitless I. It was always there, but now when the mind is quiet, each time when we ask, who am I? And the mind is still, the self is shining. That consciousness is not the spurious ego. It is not the BMI thought. It is the never-changing self. It is the infinite self. It is the transcendental, infinite reality itself. It is the blissful, real self. So, Bhagwan is once again turning us through the 29th and 30th shlokas. Don't become complacent. You may have understood the truth, but your intellect, make sure your intellect is convinced by engaging in self-inquiry. So as we come to the, why can't I change the slide? I kept getting a request for someone to annotate, and because it kept coming repeatedly, I said finally accept, but now I'm not able to change the slide. Okay, thank you. So as we normally begin by paying our respects to one of the wonderful devotees of Bhagwan, today I thought of exploring a little bit the sadhana of Suri Nagama. So Suri Nagama is a well-known devotee of Bhagwan. You may have read a book called Letters from Ramanashram. So that is authored by her and in Telugu, and then it was translated by her brother. So Suri Nagama came, she was with Bhagwan in Ramanashram during the last 9 years of Bhagwan's life. We owe a great debt to her because she has recorded so many teachings of Bhagwan. She shows us very human facets of Bhagwan. She shows us facets where we see intricacies of interaction. How Bhagwan guided disciples, what kind of dialogues did they have. So she was one of the chroniclers who was present in the darshan hall on most days, and she was busy recording what is happening. Or sometimes from memory also she would record. Also, Bhagwan made her in charge of all the Telugu documentation because she was a Telugu poet and a Telugu writer. So she was put in charge of all the books, that publications that came out in Telugu from the ashram. So who was Suri Nagamma, if we ask? She was actually a child widow. In those days, if we remember, if we recall what we have read in history, marriages would be decided between families, maybe relatives, maybe friends, neighbors. Even as the child is born, they would say, okay, my daughter will marry your son. Or why don't you ask your son to marry my daughter once they come of age? And often marriage would be celebrated also. The wedding would be celebrated. Is the audio not clear?
Very clear. I think
Okay.
person has to check
I
this
just
side.
saw a
Very clear.
chat message popped up on my screen, so I'm just checking. Thank you. So a wedding would be celebrated between small children who didn't even know the meaning of that. They would just be playing, etc. In some ways, maybe this had a meaning because the girl would often grow up in the house of the in-laws. So it would be as though she is part of that family from the beginning. So adjustments and all that would be much easier in a marriage because the marriage was between families, not just between a boy and girl in those days. So while this custom perhaps had its own plus points, many negative points also crept into it. In the case of Suri Nagamma, if we take her example, her parents passed away when she was still a child, so she became an orphan. And at the age of 12, her husband also passed away. She had grown up on being nurtured by tales of Indian Puranas. So she had thought, in her mind, she had modeled her own role as a wife, as the role of Sita. Sita had followed Rama into the forest for 14 years, though she was tenderly nurtured as a princess all her life. She became ready immediately to wear bark and go into the forest. So she felt that was the kind of loyalty that she wanted to give her spouse in her marriage. So when her spouse passed away when Nagamma was 12 years old, she was devastated. And she says she would lock herself in her room and weep for hours. She was not interested in talking to people. So it was a very, very dark and depressing time for her. But one thing brought a glimmer of light into her life. And what was this? That was listening to the Puranas, listening to spiritual talks and discourses, satsangs. And because she had never gone to school, she had no formal schooling, but she taught herself Telugu. And when she learned Telugu, she started reading the epics of Hinduism. She started reading so many spiritual books. And this around where she was with her brothers, and she had 3 brothers. Her youngest brother was an invalid. So at the age of 20, up to the age of 21, till she was 21 years old, she lived with this brother and took care of him. He passed away when she was 21, and then she moved to another brother's house in Vijayawada. So while she was there, she got a letter from her brother, another brother, that said, I have met Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi at Tiruvannamalai. He's truly an amazing sadhu. My life has changed after meeting him. divine being, so you should go. Suri Nagamma took this with a pinch of salt, but she was eager to serve a guru because she had had a dream, and in her dream, a Siddha Purusha had appeared. She felt that that person is, the divine being is Dakshinamurti himself, shining, resplendent. And a great desire had, ardor, you can say, had been born in her heart, that she wanted to serve a Mahatma. So she thought, let me go to Tiruvannamalai and see this great person. So she went there, and she says, the minute I walked in, it was 1941, and we know Bhagwan took Mahasamadhi in 1950. So the minute she went in and just one look at Bhagwan, she was wonderstruck. And she also recognized that he was the great Purusha who had appeared in her dream as Dakshinamurti. There was a great feeling of peace in her, indescribable feeling of peace. And after a few days, when she had to leave because she had not brought much clothes, etc., but she made her a resolve, I will move to Tiruvannamalai and I want to spend as much time as possible in the presence of Bhagwan. So, but still she had to go back to get her clothes, etc., to be prepared to come and stay in Tiruvannamalai for many years. So when she took leave of Bhagwan, she was weeping. And when she wept, Bhagwan said, don't worry, I'm always with you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'm always with you. So Nagamma became ecstatic, and she says from then, everybody was an epitome of Bhagwan for me. I saw Bhagwan in everybody and everything. So she came and she settled in Tiruvannamalai. She became a neighbor of Echammal, who was also always serving Bhagwan. We have looked at Echammal when she was in when we were doing Upadesha Saram, how she used to cook and bring food to Bhagwan till her very last day. So that was her tapasya. So she became Echammal's neighbor, and she would come to the ashram every day. So initially she had a lot of doubts. She says, sometimes I would be able to go very deep in my self-inquiry and get absorbed in the self. But again, at times, so many thoughts would bombard my mind. And then I would be assailed by doubts. So when I started sending notes, initially she was a little timid to go and ask Bhagwan. So she would send notes. There would be a lot of visitors. And so when these notes were handed over to Bhagwan every day, then finally Bhagwan one day told her, why do you pay so much attention to all these doubts? The more attention you pay to doubts, the more your doubts will grow. Instead of that, focus on self-inquiry. Don't go on paying more and more attention to doubts. Echammal also told her, Nagamma, begin talking to Bhagavan without any hesitation. Don't put up a barrier between yourself and him. Don't keep writing letters to him or asking your doubts through notes. Start talking to him freely. Bhagwan is very kind. He is very benevolent. He will answer your questions and he will guide you. And don't just make casual conversation with Bhagwan. When you go to him and when you talk to him, ask him for liberation, ask him for mukti. So the next time after this conversation, Suri Nagamma went to Bhagwan and very hesitantly she said, Bhagwan, I want your protection, I want mukti. So then Bhagwan normally when somebody would ask such a doubt, he would usually say, who wants liberation? Find out. Find out who is asking for liberation. Or he would say, inquire, who feels bound? Find out who it is that is feeling bound. That would be his normal response to such a request. But when Suri Nagama said, Bhagwan, please help me attain mukti, she says he actually looked at her very compassionately and nodded his head without saying, find out who wants mukti. So from that day, Suri Nagama felt very blessed, very protected by Bhagwan all the time. So the next 9 years were a wonderful time in her life, being guided by Bhagwan. And a lot of inner flowering happened for her. So this is an important thing for us. One thing is to go on till one level, doubts are good. But even after that, sometimes, instead of engaging in self-inquiry, we keep on spending our time at the periphery. We don't want to dive deep into the pool. So we just want to wade somewhere. So we sometimes generate more and more doubts in order to stay in the periphery and not dive deep into the self through self-inquiry. So that is one thing, very important thing we learn from Suri Nagama. And also that the Sadguru's protection is always there for those who are intensely involved in the path of self-inquiry. Okay, so we come to Shloka 31. In Shloka 31, let us lead and follow. Chant with our mic on mute. Aham kritim yo lasati grasitva. Aham kritim yo lasati grasitva. Kim tasya karyam parishishtamasti. Kim tasya karyam parishishtamasti. Kinchit vijanati sanatmano yat. Kimchit vijanati sanatmano yat. Tasya sthitim bhavayatum kshamah kaha. Tasya sthitim bhavayatum kshamah kaha. So, yo aham kritim grasitva. Yo, the one, aham kritim, the ego, the one who has swallowed the ego. Grasitva means to swallow. So the one who has swallowed the ego, lasati, and in whom the self is shining brightly. Kim tasya karyam parishishtamasti, for such a person, tasya, for such a one, for such a being who has swallowed his ego and who is always abiding as the self. For him, kim karyam, what work or what action, parishishtam asti, remains to be done. So Bhagwan is asking, he told us to engage in self-inquiry in 29 and 30. So then he says now, why should you engage in self-inquiry? Because when you engage in self-inquiry and the ego dissolves and you are established in the self, you are free from the feeling that you are the doer. Your roles may remain. Your life may remain as it is. You may be required to do some things, but internally you are liberated from the feeling that you are the doer You are liberated from the feeling that there is something more left for you to accomplish. Something is required to make you complete. That is completely gone. Aham kritim yo lasati grasitva kim tasya karyam parishishtamasti. So for such a one who is established in the self, who has literally swallowed the ego, what is remaining for him to do or to accomplish? Kinchid vijanati saha atmanah anyat. Saha, he, vijanati, is unable to see or perceive kinchit, even a small thing, atmanah anyat, as being apart from the self. So for him, everything that exists is a manifestation of the self. No thing in the universe exists. There is nothing that exists in the universe which is not a manifestation of the self for such a person. Tasya sthitim bhavayatum kshamaha kaha. Tasya sthitim, such a state, the state in which such a being is established, sthitim, state, bhavayatum, to understand, shamaha, ability, kaha, who has the ability to understand the state of such a being. So this is what Bhagavan is saying. An Ajnani cannot understand state in inverted commas, because this is the natural way of being. So now who can understand the natural way of being of a Jnani who is established in the self, who has swallowed the ego, and for whom every single person and every single thing in the world is just a manifestation of the self. So this is what Bhagavan is asking. Sri Ganapati Muni he says, for him who has swallowed the ego and shines as the self, what work remains? He can't cognize even the smallest thing that is other than the self. Who has the capacity to understand that state of his? And what does Sri Lakshman Sharma say? He says, what needs to be done by him who is happy in unity with that? The unity which becomes manifest by consuming the ego sense, the state of peace and bliss beyond relativity. So we have two new points here. Unending peace, unending bliss. Unending peace and unending bliss are they cannot be separate from the self. They are not attributes of the self. The self is peace. The self is bliss. It is absolute. Whereas all other things in this world, even the body, is relative. It is alive or it is dead. It is healthy or it can be unhealthy. It is young or it is old. It keeps on changing. The mind keeps on changing. Intellect keeps on changing. All of them are relative. But the substratum, which is the self, that is unchanging. It is absolute. It is always peace. It is always bliss. Since he knows nothing other than the self, how can anyone who is not so delivered or liberated imagine what that mindless state is like? So Bhagavan is using the word mindless. What does that mean? We have gone into this in detail in Upadesha Saram also. Very briefly, the mind has 4 functions. The functions are Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara, Chitta. That is what Vedanta tells us. Manas is the thinking and feeling faculty of what we call the mind. Buddhi is the reasoning faculty. It is the discriminating faculty. It is the decisive faculty. It is the faculty that identifies. Right now, it is the intellect that is identifying with the body mind, and it is saying, this is me. Okay, that is the intellect. Then we have the chitta. Chitta is the memory bank. Just like the computer has a memory, like that, we too have a memory bank in the mind in which everything is stored. Then ahankara. So ahankara, right now, for all of us, as long as we are identifying with the body and mind, it is like Fevicol. So it will go and apply glue to everything. If I see a phone, if I buy a phone, as long as this phone was in the shop, I'm seeing it, I've seen it probably just 10 minutes ago. But the minute I pay for it and it is handed over to me, then what happens? Ahankara will come and say, this is mine. Something happens to the body, Ahankara will come and say, this is happening to me. Something happens to the mind to make it unhappy, Ahankara will come and say, I am unhappy. These things are happening to me. They are making me unhappy. So it is this glue that causes suffering to us. But in a jnani, being mindless means this ahankara loses its attachment quality. It becomes functional. Yes, it says, this body, this mind, this intellect, they are my instruments. They are my upadhis. I will use them to transact in the world. I will use them to interact with others. I will use them to spread wisdom. But I am not these. All these things which are there for my use, they are there to be used, but they are not mine. So that is very, very clear. Everything is nothing but the self. There is nothing other than the self. Whereas the mind is always saying, I am different, you are different. I am different, God is different. I am different, the world is different. But the jnani, for the jnani, the mind does not function in these two ways. It does not identify with the body, mind, and intellect. It does not put the stamp of attachment, of belonging to anything around him. It has no bias. Raga, dvesha, I want this, I don't want this. That is completely destroyed forever in a jnani who is established in the self. And I am this, I am not that. That is also destroyed. Nothing is separate from him. Everything is the self. There is nothing that is not the self. So the quality that splits reality into two and it creates Satya and Mithya, that is gone. Everything is Satya. That which appears to be unreal, he will see the essence of that. He doesn't see the changing quality. He pierces straight into the core of everything and he sees the unchanging core in the changing world. He sees the essence of everything, which is the self. So that is why here Bhagavan is saying mindless state. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a mind. His mind is extremely sharp, incisive intellect, super sharp intellect. But Bhagavan is using the word mindless to indicate to us He does not separate between himself and others. For him, there are no others. One. Second, he does not get attached to the body, mind, and intellect. He does not identify with body, mind, and intellect. Therefore, he has dispassion towards everything also. He doesn't, when something happens to the phone, I get hurt. But when something happens to a belonging of the Jnani, he will take very good care of it. But if something happens to it, in spite of that, it is not going to devastate him. It will not, nothing will make him unhappy. Nothing will make him happy also because he is always peace and bliss. Because in the upper sentence, the state of peace and bliss beyond relativity, nothing which happens in the relative world can in any way dilute or can in any way corrupt or can any way disrupt this absolute state of peace and bliss. So in all those, to convey all those meanings, here Bhagavan is using the word mindless. Okay. So we had a very similar shloka in Upadeshasaram, shloka 15. Nashtamanaso. This was, we can lead and follow, or I can just chant it. Nashtamanaso Krishtayoginaha Nashtamanaso Krishtayoginaha Krityamasti kim Swastithim yataha Krityamasti kim Swastithim yataha. For the exalted yogi whose mind is destroyed and who is established in the self, what action or karma remains? Even his karmic fruits are destroyed. Nothing remains for him to do. Only the prarabdha karma which has come into this lifetime, bringing this body, mind, intellect, that still needs to be worked out. So the body exists till then. But whatever happens outside, whatever karmic fruit fructifies outside, cannot touch the core of the Jnani. The Jnani remains ever peaceful, ever blissful. He is peace and bliss despite what may be going on outside. So we have in Ashtavakra Gita, in the 3rd chapter, we have 2 shlokas which are around, which are also talking about a similar theme. So here it says, whether treated or tormented, the wise man is always aware of his supreme self nature and is neither pleased nor disappointed. So for such a person who is always aware of his supreme self nature, never for a moment, never for a second does he forget that he is the self, that he is Sat Chit Ananda. So whether you praise him or you torment or torture him, whether things happen as good, we say this is good, this is bad, but for him, nothing is good or nothing is bad because it doesn't please him or disappoint him. He has nothing to accomplish. He plays his role, the role that has been assigned to him in this lifetime, in this world. He continues to play the role, but he always knows this is a role and he knows I am the self. Therefore, whether he is praised or somebody scolds him, sometimes there was once a yogi, I have spoken about it in Upadeshasaram, but somebody came and spat in the face of Ramana Maharshi once and insulted him. Bhagavan didn't even bother to wipe away the spittle from his face. He remained the same peaceful, blissful. He was unaffected by what was happening. So many things would happen around him. Many inconvenient things would happen. People didn't always praise him. People would come and pester him. People would come and sometimes blast him. But he was unaffected by what happened. He was always benevolent to whoever came. And he was always forgiving. There are so many examples of this. So here this shloka is saying that. Then another shloka, the 12th one in the 3rd chapter, it says, who is to be compared to the great-souled person whose mind is free of desire even in disappointment, who has found satisfaction in self-knowledge. So because he is complete, a jnani who is established in the self is ever complete. It is because we identify with the body, mind and intellect, we feel limited. I am just this body. I am just this mind and this intellect. Therefore, I start feeling incomplete. And the minute I feel incomplete, a desire will arise inside me. I need something to complete me. So then I will think, oh, if I buy that, I will become happy. I will feel complete. If I get that promotion, or if I get that wonderful job, or if I marry that person, or if I have a child, or if I have a grandchild, it goes on and on, right? Then I will be happy. Then I will feel complete. How long? Few seconds, few minutes, few days, if we are lucky. Then again, we feel incomplete. One more desire. So this is the cycle. But for one who is established in the self, he is complete. His mind is free of desire. Never does a desire arise in him. A desire which needs to be fulfilled, the kind of intensity we feel, is not there in him. Therefore, when there is no desire, where is disappointment and where is fulfillment? Because of satisfying a desire. I remember once with my grandfather, I was a very small child. I was looking forward to a treat promised by my parents, which could not happen because of various reasons. And I was very disappointed. I went and sat in a corner, feeling sorry for myself. Then my grandfather came and he said, "What happened?" I said, "I'm feeling so disappointed because I could not get my promised treat." So my grandfather said, "You know, only when you have an appointment, you can have a disappointment." I didn't really understand. So I said, "Can you explain?" So he said, "Look, when you get attached, I will get this. When you get so attached to something, I want this, I will get this. And when that is there, then it doesn't happen, then disappointment. So you have an appointment with happiness. Isn't that ironical? We are bliss, but we keep making appointments with happiness. If this happens, I will be happy. So we are making an appointment with happiness. And when it doesn't happen, we get disappointed. That appointment with happiness didn't come through. Or it came through, but it actually didn't bring me as much happiness as I expected. So from that day, a little bit somewhere, even though I was quite young, I think I was in middle school, maybe fifth standard or something like that. But it made an impact somewhere inside. Yes, each time I'm looking forward to something, I'm promising that if that happens or if I get that, I will be happy. So I'm making an appointment with happiness. But now I know I am the self, I am bliss. So why do I need to make appointments with happiness? Right? Not required. So for a jnani, there is no desire, there is no disappointment because he is satisfied, content. We are sitting after a nice meal, we are very content. And then somebody says, will you come? Let us go get some ice cream. But you are full. We have all experienced this, right? And we say, yeah, maybe after some time, right now, I'm just fine. I don't need it. So we are satisfied for the time being. But for a jnani, he is always satisfied, right? Because he knows his true nature. So here is this small story. In this story, there was a MNC employee. He was a manager in a very well-known MNC company. He learned yoga and he learned some meditation. And he would sit and try to meditate. But whenever he sat down to meditate, he would be bombarded by so many thoughts. And one day he heard about Sadhguru, and he thought, let me go and meet this great being. Maybe, he will teach me some meditation technique. Maybe I won't have to, sit down and fight with my mind every time. Let me go and see. So he went, he prostrated at the feet of the Guru and he sat down in front of him. And then the Guru asked him, okay, how can I help you? So he said, see, every time I sit for meditation, I'm just bombarded by thoughts. So the Guru asked him, what kind of thoughts? What kind of thoughts do you get? So he started describing. Usually I'm thinking about my work. So I think, okay, I go to the office every day. I'm a manager, I have to manage a team. And then my mind starts mapping my career path. Instead of meditating, it starts mapping my career path. So the Guru asked him, okay, so what is your next level that you can reach? If you work hard as a manager, what can you become? So he said, I can become a director, managing many different teams. I can be the director of one section. So the Guru said, very good. So if you do a very good job as a director, then, so he said, then maybe I can even become vice president. Who knows? I'm very lucky and I do really well and I please all the bosses above me. I could even become vice president if I play my cards right. Then the Guru asks him, okay, then what? Then he's getting a little irritated. So he says, okay, then maybe I can even become the president of the MNC. Who knows? I may become the president also if I play my cards. So the Guru says, all right. Then what can you become? Now that man is really irritated. So he starts shouting, do you want me to become God? What do you want me to become? After becoming president, what more can I become? Can I become God? So then the Guru smiles, the Sadhguru smiles and he says, that is one thing that you don't have to become because you're already there. So we keep asking that question, whether we ask it consciously or not, our whole life actually depends on that question, what next? We keep asking, what next? What's the next thing I want to do? Will this lockdown extend some more? What next? Will the pandemic increase or decrease? What next? I get up in the morning, now I'm awake. What next? I've completed one task, so what next? I've reached this level in my life. What more do I want to become? What next? But for a jnani, for one who is established in the self, this what next is not there. That is what Bhagavan is saying. There is no question of what next. His roles are being played. His life is being lived, but always in the awareness of the self, always with immense peace and bliss, always looking at everybody as no other, never having any compulsion, never having any yearning. I need that, I want that, I will get happiness from this. Therefore, what next? What next? That question is not there in the life of a jnani. So, this is what we learned from Shloka 31. Let us take a look at Shloka 32. Read and follow. Aha sputam tattvamasiti vedah. Aha sputam tattvamasiti vedah. Tathapi samprapya paratmanishtham. Tathapi samprapya paratmanishtham. Bhuyo vicharo mati durbalatvam. Bhuyo vicharo mati durbalatvam. Tat sarvada svatmataya hi bhati. Tat sarvada svatmataya hi bhati. So, in 32, Bhagavan is saying, Tat Tvam Asi. Thou art that, or you are that, iti Vedaha. The Vedas are saying this. How are they saying it? Aha sputam. Aha is like bang, like hitting the nail on the head. They are so emphatically, almost explosively, they are proclaiming this. Very, very loud. In one place, Sri Shankaracharya says, Vedanta Dindimaha, like the Dindima of Lord Shiva. Loud and clear. They are saying, what is it saying? Tat Tvam Asi, you are that. Tathapi asamprapya paramatma nishtham. But in spite of that, in spite of this tathapi, paramatma nishtham, abidance in the self, asamprapya, you have not been able to attain abidance in the self. So Bhagavan is saying, even though the Vedas are proclaiming loud and clear, you are that, in spite of that, you have not been able to attain self-abidance. Bhuyo vicharo, why is this? Bhuyo, again and again, vicharo, you keep on discussing, debating. Bhuyo vicharo, mati durbalatvam, because of weakness of the mind. You keep on staying at the periphery. And you keep on discussing again and again and again and again these truths without trying to abide as the self. You are simply engaging in discussion because of mental weakness. Your mind is not strong enough. Your mind is not focused enough. Your intensity is not enough. Tat sarvada svatmataya hi bhati. Even though you are doing this, even for one who is doing this, who is still debating on Tattvamasi without plunging into self-inquiry. The ironical thing is that even in such a person, Svatmataya, the self, is with him sarvada, all the time. Only the self, bhati, is shining resplendently. Even in such a person, tat svatmatayahi, only the self which is with him. When is the self with him? Sarvada, always. Bhati, shining resplendently. So here Bhagavan is pointing out the irony. Many of us, we may be, even though we have listened repeatedly to Vedanta, but we are not established in the self. Maybe we are not having even enough intensity. Maybe we are not having enough clarity. Maybe the conviction in us is not enough. Maybe our application by plunging into self-inquiry, not enough application is happening, in spite of the Vedas clearly proclaiming that then discussing this truth again and again is only due to the weakness of the mind. The irony is that even with him, such a weak-minded one, the self is always shining brightly. So in case we feel like this, we may be able to identify with such a person. Yes, I have listened to the truth, but again and again, I need punarapi shravanam, punarapi mananam. Why? Because my mind is still weak, just like a plant that is buffeted by the wind this way and that way. Now we have a windy season, so a lot of wind blowing, slamming doors, slamming windows, right? So if we look out into the garden, we see plants also swaying. Plants which have a thin stem, they sway a lot with the breeze. So doubts will keep assailing us. Even people with whom we associate, they may say, "Arey, what is all this? Yeah, that you are," and all. Let it go. Okay, you went to that satsang, you enjoyed it, that is over. Now come, do this with us. So lots of things will be happening around us. Is the intellect convinced? If it is convinced, it will not go on discussing again and again. Punarapi Shravana is needed till the intellect is convinced. Not that we should not engage in it. Yes, that is a remedy for that. That is the only way. You need to keep on listening, but parallel to that, what should we do? We should also engage in manana and nitidhyasa. So Bhagavan is saying the irony is, even if you are not doing all that, still you are the self. Even at this point of time, you are the self. Even in you, the self is shining resplendently, not just now and then, but all the time. Isn't that a wonderful thing to think, that even right at this moment, we are the self. Right at this moment, the self is shining brightly. So that's a wonderful, heartening thought. In one way, Bhagavan is nudging us, he's pushing us. Maybe he's even goading us. Come on, go to self-inquiry. In another way, Bhagavan is saying, he's laughing and he's saying, yes, you may be thinking you are weak-minded. You may be again and again discussing. You might be spending time at the periphery instead of moving to the deep end. But you know, even in you right now, you are only the self. So on the other side, like we tell a child, we discipline a child and then we don't want to demotivate the child. So we make the child feel good also. So Bhagavan is telling the truth. Even to goad us, he is telling the truth. And even to motivate us, he is telling the truth. Sri Lakshman Sharma says, instead of winning one's own natural state, the state which is taught by the Vedas, or which is revealed in the words of the Vedas by thou art that. By entering the heart through the quest, who am I? Man goes on meditating, I am that, I am not the body. Because of mental weakness, even in him, that reality is itself ever shining as the self. So the Avadhuta Gita, in the first chapter, we have the 26th shloka that says, you are consciousness and everything is consciousness. Atmanyeva Atmana Sarva. You are consciousness and everything is consciousness, which is complete, Purnam, and unbroken, Nirantaram, without boundaries. You are not the meditator nor the object of meditation. Dhyata, dhyanam, na. Te chittam nirlajjam dhyayate katham. Why does this shameless mind keep meditating in this way? So Avadhuta Gita is also saying, don't make a split. Don't go into upasana mode. Don't go into objective meditation mode. Don't keep the self apart from the meditator. Don't think I am the meditator and the self is the object of meditation. You have understood that is not the truth. Then why does your mind shamelessly keep on meditating in this way? Drop it. When you get to know something is not the best practice, a time comes. Till a certain period, we need upasana. We need objective meditation. It purifies the mind. It gives us chitta shuddhi. It gives focus to the mind. It teaches concentration to the mind. Yes, it's required up to a point. But after that, drop it. When its role is done, drop it. Move on to self-inquiry. Don't keep putting up a barrier between yourself and the self. The self is not an object. It is you. It is who you are. You are the self. So, do nididhyasa, abide as the self. Don't do dhyana on the self. Don't do objective meditation on the self. Subjective meditation or dhyana or nididhyasa, I'm sorry. Nididhyasa is the way. So as we learn the truth, we go deeper and deeper into the truth. Practices which were necessary, practices which were useful, they need to drop away from us. And we need to move into practices which will take us to self-abidance. So one day, when Bhagwan was living at Skandashram on the hill of Arunachala, a group of people, 4 or 5 people, they wanted to see him. They had never seen Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi. They had heard a lot about him. So they climbed the hill, they went up, and they came up to Skandashram. And they looked into the cave of Skandashram. There was nobody there. And outside, there was somebody. They thought he's a laborer. He had a cloth tied around his head. And he was squatting on the ground and he was repairing something. He had some cement and mortar mixed up. He was repairing a wall. He was sitting there. So they asked him, where is Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi? They asked him a couple of times, he didn't respond. Then they asked him the third time and then he said, he went down the hill. He sort of gestured. So those people thought, okay, Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi must have gone down the hill. They started climbing down. At the same time, Echammal and another devotee, they were climbing up the hill. They were coming to Skandashram. They met this group, and HMR said, "Okay, did you have darshan of Bhagwan?" They said, "No, he was not there." And HMR knew that Bhagwan is there. He has not gone anywhere. He was not there. We searched for him. Then somebody was there, and we were told he has gone down. So we are again going down. The HMR said, "No, come with me. Let us go back." They had come down only a little way, so they all went back. Now, when they looked into Skandashram, they see Bhagwan is sitting there. During this small period of time, Bhagwan has gone, washed his face, hands, feet, everything. He has removed the cloth around his head. He has put vibhuti on his forehead, and he is sitting there. Those people didn't even recognize that the person they had spoken to. They thought he was a workman, a laborer, a civil construction worker. So that person was Bhagwan, and now the same person is sitting inside. They did not recognize him. They thought, oh, now Bhagwan has come into Skandashram. So they had his darshan, stayed there for some time, and then they went away. Then HMR took Bhagwan to task. He said, "Bhagwan, what is this? Those people have come all the way up the hill to see you, and they asked you also, where is Ramana Maharshi? And you gestured as though Ramana Maharshi has gone down the hill. What is this?" So Bhagwan smiled at her, and he said, "What do you want me to do? Should I wear a board on my head? I am Ramana Maharshi. Do you want me to wear a board on my head? Is that what you want from me?" So a humorous exchange between Guru and disciple, a disciple who was not scared to take liberties with Bhagwan. There are many such devotees. So what do we learn from this? Yes, humorous nature of Bhagwan is there, and also he knew they would meet HMR. HMR was coming up with lunch, so he knew that they will meet a little way, and they will come back. But what do we learn from this? When Bhagwan was repairing the wall, and those people were talking to him, even then he was Ramana Maharshi. They didn't know that so. Then when they came back with HMR and he was sitting inside Skandashram, even then he was Ramana Maharshi. But then they recognized him and they said, "This is Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi." And when he said, "Do you want me to put a board on my forehead?" What is he saying? That the self has to proclaim itself all the time. It is ever present. It is always there. Why do you want it to be a special event for you? Self-realization is not an event. It is not an experience. It is not something special. It is always there. It was always there. It will always be there. It is who you are. It is just recognizing your true nature. Don't look at it as an event. Don't look at it as a special experience. It is the ability to recognize your true nature, which is ever present. So even in the same way, for those of us who are right now dwelling on the self, dwelling on what is self-inquiry, dwelling on I am that, who may have weak minds may not be as strong as Bhagwan's mind. It was able to plunge into self-inquiry in a span of half an hour. He was established as the self. We may not have such strong minds. Our minds may be weak compared to him. We may need punarapi shravanam, punarapi mananam. We may need nididhyasa. We need self-inquiry. But in spite of all that, what is the great plus point? Wonderful news. It is that even right now, we are the self. We will cognize the self. We may not have cognized it. But even now, we are the self. So just keep your spine straight. Close your eyes. Lightly close your eyes. relax your body. Become aware of the witness within you. The witness who is aware of everything around you right now. Maybe the sound of the fan, maybe the sound of dishes in the kitchen, maybe a dog barking somewhere. Who is aware of all the sensations of the body. As the witness, be aware of these things. You are the witness and all those things exist. You are the witness of your breathing. You are the witness of your thoughts and emotions. You are the witness of the peace in you right now, the joy in you right now. The witness is the self. Let us just abide as the self. The witness. If a thought happens to arise, we know what to do. We ask, for whom is this thought? It is for me. Then who am I? We are asking the ego, who are you? The mind is still. We go back. We are the witness. We are always the witness. Even when you were dreaming in the night, you were the witness. You are not the character of the dream. You are not the character of waking life. You are the witness. In the bliss of deep sleep, you were the witness. That is how you know I slept well. So just for a Another couple of minutes, just stay as the witness, stay as the self. The thought comes to the self-inquiry of who am I, otherwise just be. Let us offer our gratitude and pranams, the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi, for his amazing wisdom. May his grace continue to keep this flame of awareness burning brightly within us and establish us in the self. May all beings be happy. Let us collectively offer the Punya Phala of this Jnana Yajna for the welfare of all those who are affected by the pandemic. May they recover, may they receive the help that they need. May health be re-established on our planet. Let us chant Mahamrityunjaya mantra 3 times together, keeping our mic on mute. Om Triambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनात् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनात् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात्. May all beings be happy, may all beings be healthy, may all beings be established in the bliss of the self. As you open your eyes, remain in the witnessing mode. Identify with the witness. I thank each and every one of you for being a part of this Jnana Yajna. I thank the School of Ancient Wisdom once again for giving me this wonderful opportunity to spend it in the satsang of all of you. Thank you. Malati, over to you.
Thank you, Vani. Shall we ask if anyone has a few questions? I don't see any in the chat box.
Yeah,
But
certainly.
if
Certainly.
anyone has any questions, any doubts, any queries, please unmute and ask Vani now, or you may type and put it in the chat box and I'll read it out to her. I think as of now, the only chats going on is a lot of praise for you, Vani, and the session that you've taken. I don't see
Thank
any
each one of
queries.
you for that.
Okay, so I'll go in for the conclusion. And there doesn't seem to be anybody wanting to ask any questions. So thank you, Vani. As usual, your session was really enthralling. And I'm sure all the participants seem to have understood everything very well, because there doesn't seem to be a peep from a single person around here. Anyway, so you covered shlokas 31 and 32, and the 31st shloka, you did say that a person, what is there to accomplish for a person who has swallowed his ego and who is abiding as self, and he is a liberated person, and everything that exists is just manifestation of the self. So we can understand that very well. So is such a person, he's, I mean, everything, who he has the capacity to literally imagine what the mindless state is really like, because he's in a really wonderful state of bliss and nothing can really disrupt this state. And the 32nd, yes,
Can I just add something here?
please do.
Yeah, for a person who abides as the self,
Yeah,
it is not imagination,
yeah.
it is reality for him.
It is
It is reality.
reality. Okay, I'll just make a note of that.
One is the feeling that everybody is a manifestation of the self, everything is a manifestation of the self, is a
Fine.
moment reality for him.
Okay, okay. So it's
But
not
Bhagavan did
really
say,
just mere imagination.
for
Yeah.
those who are unenlightened, who are not thus liberated, for them they can't even imagine what
Yeah.
this state of an enlightened being is like.
Yes, and the state of bliss also, I think they are not able to really realize what state of bliss the person really is in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, okay. 32nd shloka, the Vedas are always proclaiming loud and clear that you are that. But in spite of that, people tend, I mean, a person tends to, not be able to establish himself in this self. He keeps on debating. And when he keeps debating, he has a lot of doubts. And so he just, skims the surface, and then he's at the periphery of things. And when he's in the periphery of things, he's not going into the real depths. But even such a person is ironically a person who is a person of only the self, because he's only, and this self is just shining so so brilliantly, so resplendently, that it is ironical that this is happening, but this is a fact. Is that so? I mean, I put it in my
And
own
right now,
words.
when we can't imagine the state of a
State of,
jnani
yeah,
who is
yeah,
aware of the self. Even
right.
right now, in all of us, the self is shining
Shining,
brilliantly.
yeah.
Like put it
Okay.
so beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, gosh, not too bad for myself. I'm praising myself a bit because I managed to put all these things in a way that I could understand, and then you have also corrected me on the way. So now I can put it all down in my notes. Well, anyway, thanks everyone. Thanks organizers. Thanks Ram. Thanks Ravi. Thanks Aniket and Swati also, who comes out with those very pretty posters. And the next time we're going to meet is going to be next Friday, which is at 6:30 as usual, and that would be the 18th of June, and that is 18th of this month. So please do attend, because I'm sure you all will love to listen to Vani, and so sweetly and so, what shall I say, but patiently she's dealt with me also while I gave the vote of thanks. Okay. And
Take your pizza compared to that one.
and then anyway, so now I will conclude with the asking and requesting Mr. Vasudev, please. I can see you sitting there next to Bani. So please do the honors with the Shanti mantra. And before we wish good night to the participants. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Malti. So let us all chant the Shanti Mantra for the welfare and well-being of all beings in all planes.
You got some clarity on.
So let's close our eyes. We've had a wonderful satsang even today as usual.
He will praise his wife every day.
As we sit silently, watching our breath, let's inhale deeply and chant Om once and the Shanti Mantra 3 times, keeping our mics on mute. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Brahmarpanamastu. Thank you very much for your lovely presence. Good night. Thank you, Malti.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And once again, and before I wish good night, tomorrow there's a program by Swami Chidananda. Please try to attend 6:30. And then Thursday, there will be the satsang as usual. All these will be put up with the links on the School of Ancient Wisdom group WhatsApp. Thank you.